Good morning everyone and welcome to another episode of Azure Dan, the Cloud and Proud Sessions. So let's just recap on what we did last time. Now last time, if you remember, was a huge session. We deployed and configured a new IaaS domain controller. We then created domain join member servers. We made sure that we understood VIPs, PIPs and IPs. We set up load balancing between our member servers. We then configured availability sets and auto scaling. In this episode, we want to look at storage and online presence. So this session focuses on storage types, backup options and online presence. We'll begin by discussing the difference between blobs, tables and queues, and then link into our storage container using a storage explorer. We will then create an SMB file share which will be used by our member servers before we shift focus to backup solutions in Azure. Finally, we will design a multi-regional web presence and take advantage of traffic manager profiles for performance optimization. Now we are going to need some things here, okay, but they're all available on the Cloud and Proud website. The first thing you're going to need is Visual Studio. Okay, if you don't have it, we can download the community version. The second thing you're going to need is the website zip from the Cloud and Proud website. So we're going to download that, we're going to import it into Visual Studio, and then from there we'll be able to deploy it into our web apps in Azure. By the end of our session, we want to be able to plan, implement and manage Azure storage, create and manage SMB file shares, implement a backup solution, choose a hosting plan and deploy a website in Azure, and then use Traffic Manager to distribute requests between the Azure websites. Okay, so if we look at our session outcome, we're going to see that we're going to have multiple web apps. We're then going to use Traffic Manager to intelligently load these. We're going to have a backup solution. We're going to use Storage Explorer to link into our Azure storage containers. Let's get started. Okay guys, so let's start by evaluating some storage. So if I go into my Internet Explorer, let's go into our dashboard. Now again, our dashboard should all look similar. If we've been following the sessions, we should now have all of our network. We should have our domain controller and our member servers up and running. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and build a new resource group. So I'm going to hold down G and R. And under my resource groups, I'm going to go ahead and add a new one. And I'm just going to go ahead and call this storage. Okay, so we'll do that and we'll pin that to our dashboard. Okay, that's fine. Let's go ahead and clean that up a little bit. So we'll make it a 2x1 to keep it in line with the others. Okay, so we've got a new resource group, and from there let's go ahead and create a new storage container. So I click on my resource group. I'm going to go up and click on add, and from here we're going to search for storage. Okay, so we come down, we've got a storage account. Okay, and the top one here, storage account, let's go ahead and click on this guy. And it says Microsoft Azure provides scalable, durable cloud storage, backup and recovery solutions for any data, big or small. It works with the infrastructure you already have to cost effectively enhance your existing applications and business continuity strategy, and provide the storage required by your cloud applications, including unstructured text or binary data such as video, audio and images. Okay, so let's go ahead and deploy that. And we need to go ahead and give it a storage account name. So I'm going to call mine CMP data. So Cloud and Proud data. For my pricing tier, I'm just going to go ahead and select the locally redundant storage. Now, if you cast your mind back to a previous session, we have gone through this. We've spoke about locally redundant storage, having 3 local replicas in a data center, geo-redundant storage, having 3 copies in a local data center, 3 copies in a remote, and read access geo-redundant. We also spoke about the standard and premium storage tiers, with the standard being 500 and the premium being 5000. Let's go ahead and select locally redundant now, and select. From here, the resource group is fine, subscriptions fine, locations fine, and I don't want to put on any diagnostics for this one, so let's just go ahead and create our storage account. And that will take a minute or 2 to build. So while we're waiting for this to build, let's go back into PowerPoint and understand the different types of storage that we can use. Okay, so we want to talk about the 4 different options that we have. Let's start off with blob storage. Now, blob storage is binary large objects, and to be honest, it's what you're going to use 99.9% of the time. Blob storage is for users with large amounts of unstructured data to store in the cloud. Okay, we can use it for things like documents, photos, media, and backups. But more importantly, it's actually the storage for our virtual machines. Every blob is organized into a container which provides a useful way to assign security policies to groups of objects. Now, we offer 3 types of blobs: block blobs, append blobs, and page blobs. Block blobs are optimized for streaming and storage of cloud objects such as documents, media, and files. Append blobs are optimized for append operations, and page blobs are optimized for representing IaaS disks up to 1 terabyte in size. Table storage is Microsoft's NoSQL key attribute store. It's a schemaless design, making it different from traditional relational databases. It offers highly available, massively scalable storage so applications can automatically scale to meet user demand. Now, with a schemaless data store, it's easy to adapt your data as the needs of your applications evolve. Access to data is fast and cost effective, and significantly lower than traditional SQL. Table storage offers a popular alternative to traditional relational databases and can be used to store flexible data sets such as user data for web applications, address books, device information, or any other type of metadata that your service requires. Queues. When designing applications for scale, application components are often decoupled so they can scale independently. What queue storage does is provides a reliable messaging solution for asynchronous communication between these application components, whether they're running in the cloud, on the desktop, or on an on-premise server, or even a mobile device. Queue storage also supports managing asynchronous tasks and building process workflows. Now, the last one that we want to look at is Azure Files. Now, Azure File Storage offers cloud-based SMB file shares that allow us to migrate legacy applications that rely on file shares to Azure quickly and without costly rewrites. With file storage, applications running on a virtual machine or cloud service can mount into an Azure file share just as we can with a desktop on-premise. Since file storage shares use standard SMB, applications running Azure can access data in the share via file system I/O APIs. Developers can therefore leverage their existing code and skills to migrate existing applications. It also exposes a REST API for accessing data in a share. On-premise applications can therefore call the API to access the data. So let's now go back into our Azure portal and start putting this to work. Okay, so we can see that our storage account has been created. From here, as we've just discussed, we can see that we can create blobs, files, tables, and queues. Okay, let's just minimize this and clean this up a little bit. So let's make that a 1x1, and what we'll do is we'll bring this down here under our production network. Okay, so what I want to do now is I just want to jump back into the original portal because I want to download a Storage Explorer. Okay, one of the issues that people may have with this is it's not easy to get files from on-prem into our storage account. Okay, so one of the tools that we can use is a Storage Explorer. So if we go over to our original portal, which is at manage.windowsazure.com, let's just go in and do a refresh, and we want to come down and we want to access this Cloud and Proud data. Okay, so I'm going to click on the storage account, and as it changes into our splash page, we can see under Get the Tools we've got Storage Explorers. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Storage Explorers. It's going to take us to a new URL, and from here we can see that there's a number of Storage Explorers that we can download. Some are free, some are paid. The one that I tend to use is the Azure Storage Explorer for Windows. Okay, so let's go in and click on this. And from here we can see that we've got the new Azure Storage Explorer 6 Preview version 3 August 2014. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and download this. While we're downloading this, it's also important to know that we can use Visual Studio as a Storage Explorer too. But let's go ahead and download the Azure Storage Explorer zip. And we'll just wait for that to download. Okay, so let's go ahead and save as, and we're going to save that into our downloads. And with that done, let's go ahead and open the folder and extract the Storage Explorer. Okay, so we're just extracted in our downloads, and from here we can go ahead and run the program. So I'm just double clicking. Okay, so the Azure Storage Explorer Install Shield Wizard. Welcome to the Install Shield Wizard for Azure Storage Explorer 6. Okay, so I think really important there. We'll go ahead, we're going to accept the EULA. Let's say next, and install. Okay, so user account control, we'll just say yes to, and from there we can launch the program. Okay, so we now have our Azure Storage Explorer installed. Okay, what we need to do though is we now need to configure access to it. And to do this, what we need to do is add an account. And we can see as we add an account, we can choose is it a cloud storage account or a local developer account. But it wants to know the storage account name and the storage account key. So where do we find this information? Well, let's go back into our portal. Okay, and it can be anyone, so let's go into our new portal, and from here I'm going to go ahead and click on the storage account, and under my settings I'm going to come across and click on keys. Now I can get to it via settings, or I can click on the key icon up here, but I'm going to click on keys, and from here we've got the storage account name, so it's cloudandproud.data, so I'm going to go ahead and click this guy and copy that and paste that into this dialog box here, and then I'm going to go back and I'm going to take either my primary or secondary access key. So I'm going to grab the primary access key string, I'm going to go back into my Storage Explorer, I'm going to add the key and test access, and from here we can see the account access was successful. So if I hit save, what this now does is gives me direct access into that storage account, and we can see that I've got my blob containers, I've got my queues, I've got my tables. Okay, so from here I can go in, I can create new blob containers, I can refresh, I can look at the level of access that I've got to it. Okay, so I can change my security and so on. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new blob container. So if I click on blob containers and say new, I'm going to go ahead and call this images. Okay, and from here I can choose the level of access. Now I've got public container, which means anonymous clients can read the blob and container content metadata. I've got public blob, anonymous clients can read the blob content metadata but not the container itself, but I'm going to leave mine as off with no anonymous access. So let's go ahead and create this. Okay, we can now see that we've got a folder called images. Now if I click on images, I can go ahead and upload, download, view, copy, create new files directly in there. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to upload some files from my VM. So if I click on upload, I'm going to go into my documents, and in here I've got some images. So from here I'm just going to go ahead and select my images. And then from there we're going to upload 10 files to the container. Okay, so we can see that all of these are now here. If I want to view one, if I go in and say view, we can see that we can get the information about that particular type of data. So we can see the blob type is a block, it's in the container images, we've got the content type, we can see when it was modified, the name, the parent, the size, and so on. Okay, click on the content, we can go in there and we can view the content as well. Okay, and we can see that we've now got that Azure Dan Cloud and Proud in there. Okay, so that is our Storage Explorer. So let's come out of that for now and go back into our Corp data. Now from here, if I click on my blobs, that should open up, and what we should see is we now have access. Let's just wait for it to load up to our images. Okay, so we can see that we've got our images there, and from here we can go in and we can see that we've got the files in there. So we can refresh, we can delete, we've got properties, access policies, but you can see you can't upload from here. Okay, so let's move on and have a look at something that maybe is going to be beneficial to us. If we come across to files, what we now want to do is we want to go ahead and create a new file share in this storage container. So I'm going to go ahead and under file shares, I'm going to click here to create one. And I'm going to create a new file share called media. A media, I'm going to have a quota of 10 gigabytes. Okay, from here I'm going to hit create, and we can now see that we've got that media file share. Now again, cast your mind back to what we looked at when we went back to PowerPoint earlier in this session. What this is going to allow us to do is it's going to allow us to connect this up into our virtual machines. Okay, so we're going to test that now. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on my VPN. Okay, so we're going to connect up into our core network. And then from there, I'm going to remote desktop. So let's go into Microsoft Terminal Services. And let's connect up to our member server, which was 192.168.10.4. Okay, so let's just move this guy over here. Let's enter the password. And okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to attach this file share into this virtual machine that's hosted on Azure. Okay, so we just minimize that, and we're going to go back and get the connection string. So to do this, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and open up a notepad. Okay, now the reason I'm opening up notepad is because I need to pull some information from different areas. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to click on the file share. The file share opens, and at the top you can see we can upload to it. We can go into the directory, we can refresh, we can go into the properties, we can delete, and we can change the quota. The one that I want to click on though is connect. When I click on connect, it's going to give me the connection string to connect into this. Now this is what we have to modify slightly. If I paste that into Notepad, we can see that we need to choose a drive letter. So I'm going to have n colon for network. But then what it wants is the storage account key. So again, just like what we did when we created the Storage Explorer, we're going to need to go back into our storage account and click on our keys. From here, I'm going to grab my primary access key and I'm going to paste that here. Okay, so we now have the correct string for us to connect into that media share under the Cloud and Proud data storage account. So let's take the whole string and copy. Let's go into our virtual machine, and what we're going to do is we're going to go into our File Explorer, and we can see at the moment we've got a C drive, we've got our temporary storage D drive. There's no N drive in there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and I'm going to open up a command prompt, and from here I'm going to paste in that command. Okay, so netuse n colon, and then we point to the media folder and we're going to use that security key. From here I can see that the command completed successfully, and if we look here we can see that we now have access into that media folder. Okay, so from here we now have access into the media folder, and we have the option to go in there and create new files and new folders. Okay, so let's just take stock of where we are so far in today's session. We started off by building a storage account. Okay, from there we downloaded a Storage Explorer and we see how we could tunnel into this storage account. From there we uploaded some files and we tested access. After that we created an SMB file share, and we then tested connectivity into one of our member servers that we had created on a previous session. So at this point we're done with the Storage Explorer, and we're going to move in and take a look at backing up our files and virtual machines using an Azure backup solution. Okay, now in order to do this we're going to need to go back into the original portal. Okay, this feature isn't currently accessible using the new portal. So let's go into our original portal. Okay, again, if you're not already in there, it's manage.windowsazure.com. Okay, and from here what we're going to do is we're going to come down to where it says Recovery Services. And if I click on Recovery Services, it says that we have no vaults. Create one to get started. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a new vault. Now we have two options here. Are we doing a site recovery vault, an ASR vault, or are we doing a backup vault? Now ASR we'll cover in a future session. Okay, so for today we're going to look at a backup vault, and we're going to back up our on-prem files, and we're going to back up our Azure virtual machines. So let's select a backup vault. We're going to choose Quick Create. I'm going to put my region in Central US, and I'm going to call this Files and VMs. Okay, so we got our files and VMs. So I'm going to go ahead and create that vault. Okay, and that'll take a minute or two to build. Okay, and we can see that's now done. So let's click inside. And from here we can see that we've got two main sections. We can either protect on-premise workloads or protect Azure virtual machines. And what we're going to do in today's session is both of them. Let's start by protecting on-premise workloads. Now there's a couple of things that we need to do. The first thing that we need to do is install the Microsoft Azure Backup Agent and register your server. So we're going to download some Vault credentials, and that's changed. In the past what we would have had to have done was some kind of certificate exchange, but what's really cool about this is the fact that it allows us to download these credentials to register up to up to 48 hours after downloading. So I'm going to go ahead and download the Vault credentials, and it's going to generate the file for me, and I'm going to choose to save this onto my desktop. Okay, so I'm going to take my Vault credentials and save it on my desktop, and we can see that that's now done. Okay, from here we then need to choose what we're going to back up. Now we can back up server applications, we can back up or download the agent for Windows Server, System Center Data Protection Manager, or a Windows client, or we can download the agent for Windows Server Essentials. I'm going to choose this option here for my Windows client. So I'm going to click, and I'm going to choose to download the agent. So let's run. We'll just wait for this to download, and we'll run through the installation wizard. Okay, so we'll just allow that to download. It says starting the Microsoft Azure Recovery Services agent setup. Okay, and we're going to go through the installation. So the installation folder and the cache location's fine. Don't need to configure a proxy. I don't want to use Microsoft Update. And we're going to go ahead and install. So that'll take a few minutes to install. From there, what we'll be able to do is configure by associating those Vault credentials. And we're done. So from here we can proceed to registration. Okay, so you can see, look, select the Vault credentials downloaded from the Quick Start page in the Microsoft Azure Backup Vault. So I'm going to go ahead and browse, and I save that onto my desktop. So there's my Vault credentials, and then from there it's going to validate the Vault credentials, and we'll say next, and we need to choose our encryption settings. So I can go in and generate a passphrase, or I can type my own. I'm just going to go ahead and generate a passphrase, and I'm going to enter a location on where to save this, and for now I'm just going to go ahead and put that onto my desktop. Okay, so from here I'm going to say finish, and then we're going to allow that to register. Now I have noticed in the past that this doesn't always register first time, so we'll see what happens. Okay, we can see that the server has been registered successfully. It's attempting to set it up, so it appears to have worked first time out of the box this time around. If it doesn't know, guys, just click previous and then next, and it'll work fine. So from here we're going to launch the Microsoft Azure Recovery Service agent. Okay, and we can see that that's now set up. So the Microsoft Azure Backup supports scheduled backups of files and folders to an online location. But it tells us that backups have not been configured on this server. Click Schedule Backup in the Actions pane to configure the backup options and schedule a regular backup. Now if you're looking at this and you've used Windows Server in the past, this is going to be very familiar to you. It's Windows Backup. Okay, so let's go ahead and click on Schedule Backup. Okay, from here we're going to select what we want to back up, how often we want to back up, how long we want to keep it for. Okay, so we can use this wizard to select the files and folders to back up online on a regular schedule of days and times. Okay, before beginning the wizard we need to decide what we want to back up, what we want to exclude from the backup, when we want to back up, what time during the day we want to back up, and how long we want to keep them. So let's say next, and we'll select the items that we want to back up. So I'm just going to say add items, and from here I'm going to go in and under my user data I'm going to select my Azure Dan, and on my desktop I'm going to go ahead and back up my website. Okay, so I'm selecting my website to back up. I'm going to say next. When do I want to back this up? Well, I want to back this up every day at 5 AM. Okay, now I can do this up to 3 times a day, but every day at 5 AM I'm going to back up my website. From here I'm going to select a retention policy. So I'm going to got my daily retention policy, So every day at 5 o'clock for 180 days, I've got my weekly retention policy, my monthly retention policy, and my yearly retention policy. For the sake of this demo, I'm just going to leave it at the defaults. Okay, so I then need to choose my initial backup type. Am I doing an offline backup, by where I can copy the data onto this and then send them off to Microsoft? Or because it's such a small file, I'm going to choose to automatically back up over the network now. From here, let's say next and then say finish. Okay, and we can see that it's creating the backup schedule. So at 5 AM, I can expect that data to be uploaded into my Azure Backup Vault. However, we don't want to wait till 5 AM, so what we can now do to test that this works is move up to Backup Now. Now when I click on Backup Now, it's going to say Backup Now will back up the server using the following settings. So it's taking that schedule backup settings that I've just configured and initializing it immediately. So let's say Backup, and from here what it's going to do is take that data and upload it into the Azure Vault. Okay, and that'll take a moment or two, so we'll pause the video and we'll come back once that's uploaded. And we're back, and we can see that the job completed. Okay, so it's uploaded 23 megabytes. Okay, so once it's uploaded, obviously if we need to, we can recover the data, and it's as simple as going up to recover data. Okay, you can use this wizard to recover files from a backup service and restore them to your server. To get started, identify the server on which the backup was originally created. Was it this server, Azure Dan, or another server? So it was this server. Okay, files can be restored either using browse or search. Let's browse. Okay, we're going to select the volume, so it was the C drive. The date that we want to restore from, so our last backup, which was obviously a few moments ago. The items that we want to recover, so we can now drill down and select the items that we want to recover. We can specify the recovery options. Are we backing up, restoring to the original location or another location? When items in the backup are already in the recovery destination, are we going to create copies or overwrite, or do not recover the items? Okay, and then from there we'd go in and confirm. Now I'm going to cancel out of that. I'm sure you've all done a recovery in the past. So let's move on to the next section. So I'm going to cancel out of this, close down this, and go back into my Azure portal. So from here, what we want to do is we now want to have a look at backing up our IaaS VMs. And we can see there's three options. We need to discover the Azure virtual machines, register the Azure virtual machines, and then protect the Azure virtual machines. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to choose to discover the virtual machines. Okay, so under registered items, we've got Azure virtual machines, and it says you haven't registered any items yet. To get started, register the items you want to protect and then protect them using the protect action. But before we can register them, we need to come down and discover. So I'm coming down to this area here and hitting discover. Okay, and it says discovering new items. If you're doing this operation for the first time, it can take several minutes to complete. So again, we'll pause the video, we'll come back once they're discovered. Okay, and we're back. So we've now discovered the items. So let's go ahead and click on register. And what we'll see is we've got our domain controller, our member server 1 and member server 2. So I'm going to go ahead and click on my Cloud and Proud member server 1. We can see that that's now selected. We're going to hit OK. And it's going to create the job to register the selected item. Okay, so we can now see that that machine is registering into the vault. Once it's registered, we'll be able to go in and protect. So that's now registered. So let's come down to protect. And from here, we're going to select the items that we want to protect. So I'm going to select Cloud and Proud member server 1. From here, I'm going to choose to select an existing policy or create a new one. Okay, so I'm going to choose to create a new policy, and I'm going to call this daily backup, and I want to back up this machine daily at, let's say, 10 p.m. So daily at 10 p.m. Okay, from here we're going to look at our retention range. So it's daily retention, retain backup taken every day for 180 days. And just like we looked at on the file backup, we can choose weekly, monthly, and yearly. So I'm going to go ahead and accept the defaults and OK. And that job will then configure itself. Okay, and we can see that we've successfully created the backup policy and we're good to go. So if I click on my policy, we can now see that we've got our daily backup. Okay, we can go in and look at what the policy is all about. And if we go back, we can see jobs that have currently run. Okay, so we can see that we've done the register, we've configured the protection, but at the moment, no backups have occurred. Okay, so let's just quickly go back into protected items. Under our Azure Virtual Machines, it's also important to note that just like before, now this is registered as a protected item, we can also go ahead and back up now. Okay, so if I click on backup now, it's going to create the job and that machine will then be fully protected. So that's backup, which moves us on to our final topic for today's session. What we're going to do is build a couple of web apps, one in Europe, one in the USA, and then use Traffic Manager for intelligent load balancing. Let's take a look. Okay, so hopefully you've downloaded Visual Studio and you've downloaded and extracted the web files that I've appended to this session. So what we'll do is let's just minimize this and let's come down and open up Visual Studio. And once we're in Visual Studio, we just want to come along to File and we're going to open a website. And we're going to browse to where our website is. So mine's on my desktop. So there's my website. Let's open that up. And we'll just click on index.html. So this isn't a web programming session. We're not going to go in and do anything particularly clever. I've already written the content for us. We're just going to take that content and we're going to upload it into some Azure Web Apps. Before we do that, let's just make sure that it runs. So if we go into Internet Explorer, and we're going to run without debugging. And what we should see is we've got Powered by Azure, the Cloud and Proud sessions with just a little link to visit the website. So that's all we're going to be uploading, guys. So let's minimize that and minimize this console too and go back into our Azure portal. Okay, so it's a new topic, so let's build a new resource group. So again, going to hold down my GNR. And from our resource groups, I'm going to go ahead and add. And I'm going to go ahead and call this Web Apps. So let's go ahead and pin that one to the dashboard. And with that done, we're just going to clean up and make sure it's put into the right place. So we'll make it a 2x1. And just like before, we're going to drag this guy over to here. Okay, so our Web Apps resource group is created. Let's go ahead and create our first web app. So I'm going to click into the resource group. I'm going to click on Add. And from here I'm going to type in Web App. And hit search. So let's put a space in there. So Web App. And hit search. So top result, web app, that's the one we want. If we click on the web app, okay, create and deploy websites in seconds, as powerful as you need them. Leverage your existing tools to create and deploy applications without the hassle of managing infrastructure. Microsoft Azure websites offer secure and flexible development, deployment, and scaling options for any size web application. Okay. Use frameworks and templates to create websites in seconds. Choose from source control options like TFS, GitHub, and Bitbucket. Use any tool or OS to develop your site with .NET, PHP, Node, or Python. Okay, so that's fine. So let's go ahead and create. And we're just going to go ahead and fill in the wizard. Let's just wait for this to wake up. So our app service name. So I'm going to call this AZN US. So Azure then US. Okay, we're going to use our Visual Studio MSDN. It's going to go into, now look, the resource group is wrong. So I'm going to click on this resource group and I'm going to make sure that it goes into web apps. So I want to make sure that it goes into the right resource group. Okay, so AZ then US, Visual Studio, Web Apps Resource Group, and my app service plan, the location is going to be US. Let's just have a look. So let's go ahead and create a new app service plan. Okay, just so we can go through the motions of doing it. We could have used the default, but we'll just go through the motions. So I'm going to call this AZ then US plan. And we're going to choose the location as Central US. Okay, and the pricing tier we're going to leave as standard. So single core, 1.75 gig of RAM up to 50 gig of storage. So that's fine. Okay, let's select, and create. Okay, so that'll take a moment or two to create. Once it's done, we'll be able to go ahead and upload our web app. Okay, so it's done. So the web app has been created. We can see that the web app has a URL. So http Azure then US AzureWebsites.net. If we click on this, it's going to open up a new link. And from there we can see that the web app has been successfully created. But it's not the website that we want. So let's go ahead and upload our website and replace all of this. So how do we do it? Let's close this down. And from here what we're going to do is we're going to click on Get Publishing Profile. Okay, so I'm going to get the published profile. And we're going to save this onto our desktop. Okay, so onto our desktop, I'm going to save AZ then US. That's now downloaded. And we're going to use Visual Studio to get our website uploaded into the cloud. So from here, all I'm going to do is I'm going to go across to my website. I'm going to right click and I'm going to choose to publish this web app. Okay, so I'm going to publish the web app. And from here what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose to import the file. So when I click on import, I'm going to select the published profile. Okay, so on my desktop I've got the AZ then US published settings file. Let's bring that in. And from here we can publish. Okay, so this is now going to start uploading into the cloud. Okay, so we can see that the publish is started. That should take a moment or two. It shouldn't take too long. Publish succeeded. So now AZ then US at AzureWebsites.net comes back powered by Azure with our Cloud and Proud sessions. Okay, let's just close that down and we'll just make sure again. So back into this portal, click on the URL. It should now take us into our web app. And it's as easy as that, guys. I guess while we're here we should take a look at some of our other options. So if we go into all settings, we can see that we can check the health of our web app, we can troubleshoot, we can create a new support request, we can go into the properties, we can set up backups, we can set up authentication and authorization, we can look at diagnostics logs. But one of the things that you may want to do as you come down, you may want to register a custom domain an SSL certificate. So if we click on custom domains, we can see that Azure is linked in with GoDaddy, so we can buy a domain directly from the Azure portal. So if I click on buy domain, I can go in, I can search for the domain name and how I want to pay and renew. Okay, and again we can link to an existing domain, or we can upload existing certificates. Okay, so with that done, what we're going to do now is we're going to duplicate that web app, but this time do it for Europe. Before we do it, let's just clean this up. So let's make that a customize. Let's go one by one, and we're going to bring this down here and done, and then go back into our resource group, and we're going to go ahead and create a new web app, this time for Europe. Okay, so let's go web app like before. Let's select our web app and create. And if we move that across, this one's going to be AZ Europe. And again, we're going to use Visual Studio in the right resource group this time, web apps, that's fine. So let's go ahead and create a new app service plan. So I'm going to say new. This time I want the app service plan to be in, let's say, North Europe. And I'm going to call this AZ Europe plan. Okay, so that's fine. Let's say OK. And create. And we'll get that web app to create, and we'll upload from Visual Studio again. Okay, so we can see that it's created. So just like before, what I'm going to do is we're going to take a look at the URL. So azeurope.azurewebsites.net. If we click on it, it's going to open up and show us that the web app has been created, but we need to upload the file. So just like before, we're going to download the published profile. Let's save that onto our desktop. And then go back into Visual Studio, and this time we're going to publish the web app. But if we go back to our profile, we're going to import the new published settings file. So this time we want the AZ Europe published settings. Let's say open, OK, and publish. Again, like before, that will take a moment or two to upload. It shouldn't take too long. We'll just wait for that to upload. And that's now done. So we now have it in AZ Europe and AZ US. Let's close down. Let's minimize this, and again just make sure that that loads and we can see it does. Okay, so we now have it in both locations. Let's just clean up our screen. So under customize, let's make it a 1x1, and let's bring Europe over here too. So we're done. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to look at Traffic Manager. And what Traffic Manager is going to do for us is it's going to direct our clients to the closest resource. So how do we do that? If I click on ADAN, US or Europe, either would do. And under all settings, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to Traffic Manager. Now when I click on Traffic Manager, it's not currently supported in this profile, okay, but that's fine. So all we'll do is we'll just click back and go back into our original portal, and from our original portal what we'll do is we'll scroll down and we're going to select Traffic Manager. And it says you have no Traffic Manager profiles. Create one to get started. Okay, so let's go ahead and create a Traffic Manager profile. Okay, we're going to select our subscription, and we're going to call this AZ Demo. Okay, so azdandemo.trafficmanager.net. This is going to be the new URL. Okay, so the load balancing method, we've got three options. We've got performance, round robin, or failover. So the one that I'm going to pick is performance. So let's say create, and we're going to allow this traffic manager profile to create, and it should take seconds. Okay, so that's now done. So from here we can see it's inactive. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on traffic manager profile. We're going to come across to the endpoints. Okay, now from the endpoints, once that's loaded, we're going to add an endpoint, and we're going to do this not for a cloud service but for a web app. So from here we're going to select the US and the Europe web apps, and it says only standard web apps are eligible for this, so that's fine. So let's go ahead and complete and import those into Traffic Manager. Okay, and we can see that at the moment it's just checking and they're being imported. Okay, while that's happening, if we go over to configure, here's where we could change it from performance back into round robin or load balancing if needed. Okay, we can choose our DNS time to live, and we can change our DNS name and what ports we're using. Okay, so back into endpoints. We can see that's still checking, so we'll just give it a few moments and then we'll come back and we'll make sure that it's working. Okay, and they're now both online. So again, we've got US and Europe online, but we're not going to get to them via these URLs. What we're going to do is, if we go into configure, we're going to now access the websites via the azdandemo.trafficmanager.net. And just to make sure everyone's happy with what's happening here, although we've got one website in Europe and one in US, the purpose of going through this DNS name is that Traffic Manager will redirect us to our closest web app endpoint, which means we'll always get the fastest performance and the lowest latency. So let's go into a page, let's paste this in. And we can see that we now have Traffic Manager responding to the session closest to us. Today's episode of Cloud and Proud focused on presence and storage. We began by building a storage account. We then looked at storage explorers, SMB shares, and backup of both files and our Azure VMs. In terms of presence, we built multiple web apps, and we then used Traffic Manager to make sure that we were always presented with the one closest to us. I want to thank you for taking the time to watch and look forward to seeing you in the next session.